Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Ukrainian talk show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today's guests are Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha.
Great to
Glad to
see
be
you.
here as always.
Absolutely. And Ivan Kucherenko from Kyiv, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hi, Jonathan. Nice to be here as well.
Okay, Ivan, great to see you as always. So, what do you feel, Ivan? I would like to ask you about the last week, it is the D-Day celebration and visit Zelensky in France and the meeting with Biden. And basically, it all sounds positive to me, but maybe you know something that we should also have our attention to it.
Hopefully, the last week on the political area for Ukraine, I think, was pretty good, and we've seen a support from all major leaders towards Ukraine, and commitment from France to give us a new type of planes, Mirage airplanes, which will be more efficient with French-made Scalp missiles. And you probably see that scene when veteran of the Second World War they tried to kiss the hand of President Zelensky, saying that his hero and defending now, and this was so. I even can't find words in English of this type of moment, and when heroes from our past, which definitely saved the world from the horrors of the Nazism, from the victory of Hitler, now admits that Ukraine is holding the front lines and saving the world, the civilization from the horrors, the Russism of the new Hitler, of Putin, and that if Ukraine will fail in this very difficult mission, then more and more people from America, from United States, from Europe will have to die in war with Russia, and obviously not only with Russia, because at that moment maybe other Russian allies will join this war directly. I know the Iran is helping Russia indirectly, China is helping Russia, but within the direct confrontation between the Russia and NATO, obviously Russia will not be able to stay, but this will make an opportunity that China, Iran, maybe North Korea will like to join Russia in this war.
Well, Ivan, I would support what you're saying, in that also this represents a defining moment in history where the Western allies are in fact have collectively learned the lessons of history. They have learned the lessons from the Second World War and the things that took place before it, and they are determined not to let those lessons, let those mistakes be repeated. So they are going to stop the aggressor while they still have time and opportunity to do so.
Jonathan, it just strikes me that it's very interesting concept is that Russia is a true country that took over all the Soviet Union assets and liabilities and everything else. No other country of the former Soviet Union claimed that they're become also some kind of continuation in even a tiny way. It's neither Ukraine or Uzbekistan or of course, never mind, Baltic republics or so on. So what's interesting is that Russia, if you remember, we discussed it at the beginning, Second World War, they were on a side of Hitler. They
Correct.
were on the side against all humanity, all civilization, all Western, the Eastern, just name it. They were until the June 22nd, 1941. And between September 39 and the June 41, they actually annexed a large part of Western Belarus and Western Ukraine. So this why, even that Ukraine, whether you want it or not, it was a part of Soviet Union, so they were together with Russians fighting fascism. But it's too simplistic because
Correct.
if you remember that the war finally was over in May 1945, and Ukrainian patriots or nationalists, or you can call them any way you wish, they were fighting Soviet Union armed forces right until 1954.
You are correct. Yes.
9 years they were resisting. That tells me a lot, because when Russia finally started to annexion of Crimea in 2014, so they didn't portray themselves as great friend of Ukraine. If they're, despite of this agreement of 1994, this Budapest Treaty or whatever you want to call it, they still, while being signatory to this Budapest Agreement, they annexed Crimea. Furthermore, unfortunately, the other two signatories, the US and England, they were of the opinion that, don't resist, we will figure out, or I don't know how they were, but it was
They were going along to get along.
Yeah, you can call it that, and it's hard for me to see, based on what we know now, how the Americans and other Western powers reacting to things what's happened to Ukraine. This is very reasonable from that point of view, what they've done with Crimea, because what would they start nuclear war because of the Crimea? How else they could affect it, and so on. It was difficult. Also, I remember when Russia invaded Georgia in 2008, there were some U.S. Warships were moved into the Black Sea, so to restrain Russia, and actually they were almost taking the capital of Georgia, Tbilisi, almost any time, but it was stopped, and finally the large war was avoided. But still, you can see now the certain trace of what's happened in the Russian behavior toward Ukraine and Ukrainian people just as well. And I would like to, Ivan, let's, by the way, ask you, you have a movie for us to see.
Just wanted to add that one of the most important news of the last 2 weeks was that our Western allies, at least, allowed us to use their weapons to make strikes on Russian territory, and according to the US officials, that allowed the Ukraine to stop the advance of Russian troops in Kharkiv region. So I've got a short movie about this issue, so let's watch it.
Displeasure.
Here is why Ukraine wants to strike sites in Russia. The Russia pilot proudly shows glide bombs he drops in Ukraine. They are menace for border cities of Kharkiv and Sumy. This home improvement store was hit in broad daylight. 18 people, including a 12-year-old girl, were gone in seconds. Such bombs are unstoppable by air defenses. And Russian military jets like the Su-34 don't need to enter Ukraine's airspace to launch them. Cruise missiles are even worse. They reach border towns in 40 seconds. In May, Russia tripled its strikes in Kharkiv. The dots on the map are Russia's bases and airfields where attacks are launched from. Most of them are in the Kursk and Belgorod regions. To protect its border towns, Ukraine wants to hit military sites there preemptively. Long-range missiles like ATACMS with a 300-kilometer range could help, but their use is still restricted. Ukraine's allies are slow-walking on loosening restrictions. Meanwhile, Russian bombs continue to terrorize Kharkiv and Sumy.
So from one side, allies allowed to use weapons, but United States still doesn't allow to use ATACMS missiles to strike the targets, and I really don't know what is the reason behind such decision, allowing to use artillery but not allowing to use very precise systems like ATACMS missiles, which actually will destroy the majority of Russian aircrafts just on the airfields. They have no defense against that. Those missiles can be intercepted by Russian anti-air defense systems, and using that, Ukraine will be able to down the Russian potential in air just within a couple of weeks. The majority of Russian airplanes can be destroyed just on the airfields, and why not allow this? This is ridiculous.
My only response to what you're saying, Ivan, is that it is a combination of a lack of a coherent strategic view on the part of U.S. leadership. There is no coherent agreed upon strategy. They don't have an overall framework within which to act, so they are responding to each situation as it comes up. And so therefore, if you don't have an objective, any direction, any plan will get you there. So that's essentially it. And so it's interesting, even though as whenever Ukraine is given more freedom to act on its own and take the initiative, the results have been positive for the defense and very negative for the Russians. So the implication is that the United States should or ought to allow the Ukrainians complete freedom of action to use whatever weapon. We give you the weapons, you use them in the best way possible that you can to stop the Russian offensive. But what is probably constraining U.S. leadership is the continuing U.S. fear of escalation of Russia's nuclear forces. The Russians have been doubling down, so to speak, on that one strength that they have. It is the basis not only of their perceived status as a great power, but is their only real means of leverage against the Western allies. They are trying to play up on that fear of nuclear escalation to strikes on NATO and so forth. And as long as they are able to do that, and as long as you have a U.S. leadership that is unwilling to take a risk or to essentially, I would say, to call their bluff and do that and go ahead and support Ukraine to the full extent possible, we are going to continue to have this slow walking, this incremental improvement. I still maintain, however, that the Ukrainian military and political leadership still control their own destiny. They do. And if they can use what they have been given to maximum effect at the right time to inflict a decisive operational defeat on Russian forces. And my estimate, as is the estimate of an increasing number, apparently, of Western military analysts, that decisive area is going to be Crimea. Cut off the Crimea, isolate it. That leaves them open to the commitment of Ukrainian strategic reserves to force the surrender of Russian occupation forces in Crimea, and that all by itself will be a decisive military victory for the Ukrainians, and will force the Russians either to the peace table or to withdraw.
By the way,
Ivan, just a sec. I watched yesterday interview with the Israeli colonel. He speaks Russian by the name Tamar. And he is very popular on the Russian YouTube channels. And of course, he's 100% pro-Ukrainian. And when he was asked similar question about using the US or West supplied weapons against Russian territory, on Russian territory. He said something that it's sometimes similar situation is in Israel when Americans are telling them, well, you can do that much, but not so much, and here and there. And Israeli would always say, yes, yes, of course, but then they would do just exactly what they feel they need to do. And he said that West would respect Ukraine even more if they would forget about all this double talk, or you can use, latest, by the way, do you remember what latest Biden said? You can use our weapons anywhere except Kremlin. So if it's not Kremlin, Moscow Kremlin, because there are some other Kremlins. So as long as it's not Moscow Kremlins, go ahead and use all this, whatever you want to do it. So Ukrainians, in my opinion, should ask less and less. Can we use this? If
they should, Sasha, they should simply take the approach of it is easier to beg forgiveness than to ask permission.
Absolutely.
I've heard recent information that due to successful Ukrainian strikes on Crimea, when Ukrainian army managed to destroy several Russian air defense systems, S-300 and S-400, Russia is moving the rest of the air defense systems from Crimea, and that the air defense personnel and their families are recommended to move out from Crimea. I don't know whether these rumors are confirmed or not, but this will make a situation when military objects in Crimea will not be protected by any air defense systems. They are now not protected as much because Russian air defense systems in Crimea are not effective against the ATACMS missiles. They miss a lot of Ukrainian drones and miss a lot of Scalp and Storm Shadow missiles. And if they will remove the rest of air defense systems from Crimea, then it will be like a holiday for Ukrainian rocket troops and artillery and the pilots of the drone systems, where they will be able to choose any target in Crimea they want to attack, and let's destroy that military object in Crimea for today.
Maybe soon there will be no targets at all. They will move them all out.
All of what you gentlemen are describing is the necessary prerequisite for a successful Ukrainian counteroffensive strike that will retake the Crimea. All the conditions are steadily being met, and so therefore, the more the Russians are forced to withdraw their air defense cover and everything, I think they are quietly, although reluctantly, conceding that Crimea cannot be held. Absolutely. And once that takes place, then we will have a major development, which ought to, for at least most rational leaders, compel them to say, okay, we are going to cut our losses. We've succeeded in our special military operation anyway, and so forth. We're going to, in effect, declare victory and go home.
Very interestingly, that also during the last week, there was, because Russia wanted to show something when they are not invited to the D-Day celebration. So they wanted to show their progress in economics and everywhere else. So they had Petersburg Economic Forum. Of course, there was no Western countries represented, so they were mostly Uzbekistan, China, some other similar countries from that region. But what's interesting is that the main theme of this was that Russians actually looking for investors in their military industries. That's quite interesting, because they were claiming that they're producing millions of weapons and millions of this and that. And now they also show during economic forums, they show 10 T-34 tanks from Second World War, believe it or not. 10,
Yeah, yeah, they're turning out millions of weapons. Like, yeah, Khrushchev used to claim that the Soviet Union was turning out ICBMs like sausages.
they never
Turns out
had real sausages. So
they couldn't even turn out sausages like sausages.
and what's interesting is that I think the last day of that forum, there was a joint interview of Putin and somebody you should know, Karaganov.
Ah, yes, Professor Doomsday. Oh,
Professor
wonderful.
Tuesday, exactly.
The comic book character.
Absolutely. Anyway, horrible person. I've seen him on TV quite a few times. And but what's
Man,
interesting?
man looks like he walked through the ugly forest and hit a few trees.
Absolutely. And so they were playing a show. The Putin was a good policeman and the Karaganov was a bad one. So Karaganov is saying, so, well, obviously it's coming now time to seriously take a look of using nuclear weapons, and not only tactical nuclear weapons, but all others, because the time has come. Now, Putin is a good policeman. He's saying, no, Mr. Karaganov, I wouldn't suggest so. There is no time. We can use our conventional weapons and still prevail. And Karaganov says, but there is all NATO. NATO is attacking you, so you have to prevent NATO from taking over the Russia. How can you do? So, oh, Mr. Karaganov, we're okay.
You know, Sasha, that sounds very much like what U.S. police often would do when they would interview a criminal. They use a tactic called good cop, bad cop. You know, the bad cop threatens the criminal with all sorts of dire things, and then the good cop comes in and says, "Well, no, if you, I'm holding back my party. If you cooperate, we'll go easy." Good cop, bad cop. So here is Putin with Karaganov playing good cop, bad cop with the West.
Yeah, and Putin actually at the very end of this conference, he said to Karaganov that I would like to tell you, Mr. Karaganov, that even to talk about using nuclear weapons is not, I mean, it's forbidden thing. So he is now repeating what Chinese told him quite a long time ago. And then Western leaders told him that not ever even think about using nuclear weapons. So now Putin tells the same thing to Karaganov. So he is a good learner, right?
Right.
He
And if
is.
you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you.
What, Crimean Bridge?
Not that one. That's a bad risk.
It's very, very bad. So maybe because they can sell it 10 cents on a dollar. If it's such a huge.
You'll be able to sell it for scrap.
Yeah, well, I think that at the time to do this Crimean Bridge will come in the next probably few weeks, because the more weapons Ukraine receives, and now it's becoming almost inevitable, because it would be very, very hard to justify receiving so much weapons and more and more and more, and not to use it for some kind of a very strategic and very decisive the attack against Russians, and
They have to they have to decide. They know their resources are not infinite, obviously, but they know that if they once they commit these weapons, you are correct, they will have to commit them in sufficient numbers to have a decisive result, but on the right target, on the right set of targets, which will set the stage for subsequent victories. So they have to husband their resources as they accumulate the right kinds of weapons, and then the Ukrainian military leadership, in conjunction with their political leadership, they make the decision as to when and where to strike. That has to be.
And the only thing what could delay that is a F-16s.
The F-16s will introduce another unknown factor into the equation. You know, the unknown to the Russians are just how decisive are these F-16s going to be, and how are the Ukrainians going to employ them? Well, that's for the Ukrainians to know and for the Russians to find out.
Well, and I think that maybe there is not much talking about it, but I think that the Western advisors will help Ukrainians to use these weapons, including F-16s, and so it will be all because Ukrainians may simply because they never had F-16, so they may not be able very quickly to learn how to integrate F-16s with all other weapons and armies that they have. So maybe the Western advisors will help them to reach the complete integration of the force.
And as they once they figure out precisely how to integrate them, then they will have them in. They will in their, when they once they have sufficient numbers of F-16s to be able to make their effects felt decisively at the right time. It's all a matter of timing and anticipating what will be the most effective use of these, along with all the other weapons that they have available. So,
Most experts predict that the right number to start with F-16s would be 200. Is it a realistic number, do you think?
certainly sounds realistic enough. I mean, with those kind of numbers, my goodness, you employ, especially if you employed F-16s as part of an operation over Crimea, they would certainly give the way that the air defenses of the Russian air defenses are being degraded. You all of a sudden introduce F-16s in mass as part of an air superiority operation, and yes, that would be very decisive, and it would probably facilitate or accelerate the recovery of Crimea from Russian control.
Also, there could be used for air defenses. For example, even all these flights that are flying from Kursk and all these airports, Belgorod, and etc., the F-16s can easily demolish these Russian planes. So they will not be able to drop this flying bombs over Kharkiv and other targets. So that could be very, very useful policy, how to use F-16. So because from what I understand, F-16s is a multi-purpose aircraft, and they can be used in many, many different ways. So I think so. There are two questions. Number one, use of F-16s, and number two, integrate their use with other armies.
You can't use F-16s when you don't have F-16s because Ukraine was
Yeah.
promised that they will be in the end of the autumn or of the spring. Now in the beginning of the summer, some summer already began. It's June, and we still don't see any F-16s in Ukrainian sky, and that's. Hopefully, we will see them pretty soon, but I'm afraid that it can be the same situation like it was with the Ukrainian counteroffense last year, when everyone promised Ukraine a lot of tanks, a lot of armored vehicles, and we still haven't received the half of the promised equipment for more than a year after that. And the same situation maybe
I think
with
the Western allies have learned their lessons better since last year, and now they're.
I hope.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Ukraine will get Mirage earlier than F-16s. That's another perspective, because France said that the Mirage, I don't remember how many of them, 50 or some. I remember for some reason 50. They are ready to be employed right away, tomorrow, next day, whatever. It's just to train Ukrainian pilots how to use them, and Ukrainian pilots are very, very fast learners, and I'm pretty sure that they will understand how to. Well, they know how to fly MiG-29 and Su-35. I think they will learn it pretty fast, and then Mirage could be used. And Mirage is also a very effective weapon. They've been around for a while. I know that Israel used a lot of Mirage fighters, and Even Argentina used Mirage during the Falkland War, and quite successfully.
That didn't help them. And that
No, in the long run, no. But there were some successes, short-lived as they are, but still. It's not Mirage is not the reason why Argentina lost Falkland War. Trust me on that.
Argentina is the reason Argentina lost.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Argentina was not Mirage.
And they had the misfortune to be facing Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah. Today,
The Iron Lady, as the Soviet leadership referred to her.
yeah, she did.
we lack such leaders now. We watch what the Russian invasion shows, because we don't have Ronald Reagan, we don't have Margaret Thatcher. We don't even for now have Boris Johnson as a leader of the Great Britain, because with his leadership, the help from Great Britain in the beginning of the Russian invasion was pretty much. And from other side, actually, we have such politicians as President Obama, who actually allowed Russia to occupy Crimea, and that was one of the major mistakes, because Russia, you said that Ukraine will destroy all military objects in Crimea, but Russia was building military objects in Crimea for 8 years, and Crimea currently is a high militarized zone. There was a lot of military bases left from the Soviet Union, but they were not functional because Ukraine didn't develop them, and Russia restored all that military objects and built new, and now Crimea transformed from a really nice resort place to one big military base, and that is the consequences of the politics of President Obama, who didn't show Putin his place right in 2014, when he actually broke the international security principles by annexing Crimea and starting a war on Donbass. And also, in these times, we lack such politicians, and without them, we see what we see. There is uncertainty in the approval of using Ukraine Western objects, uncertainty in providing Ukraine with Taurus missiles from Germany, when Chancellor Scholz is trying to. I don't know what he's trying to achieve, what he is afraid for, because even Great Britain offered Germany a deal when they will give Taurus to Great Britain, and Great Britain will provide Ukraine with more Storm Shadow missiles, but they didn't accept such deals. So,
Ivan, you're right about the leadership, because I remember the start of Falkland War. So there was a session of British Parliament, and they discussed, and there were a few speakers here and there. So finally, when it came time for Margaret Thatcher, what she said is, "Send there the bloody ships." That was the end of story. And the ships went there, and we know all the final of it. So I hope Western politicians are learning their lessons, and I think this summer,
slowly but surely, they appear to be coming to their senses and realizing that this is a situation analogous to the beginning of World War II in Europe.
yes, absolutely,
and that they have a small window of time, a small window of opportunity, but they still yet have the opportunity to stop Russia here in Ukraine and be able to prevent a larger and more costly war in the future. But it's a difficult path, but it's still better than doing nothing. And as one wise person once said, the only thing that is required for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing.
At least one comment before we finish the program. I would like to mention one comment on Putin and Karaganov press conference was that that proves that Putin is a more or less normal person because he is scared to die. That's why he is not going to allow use of nuclear weapons, and so therefore all this noise about nuclear weapons is about to stop. Actually, in the last couple of days, I never heard any of this usual propaganda channels, whether it's a Soloviev or others. Nobody is mentioning this nuclear weapons issue anymore. It's done, effectively, right?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for today's program, and looking forward to meet you on Friday, same place, same time. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Glory to Ukraine. Bye-bye, everybody.